So I'm Dr. Erica Taylor, so pleasure
Very
to meet
nice to
you.
meet you. Dexter Spitz.
And I'm Dr. Jasmin.
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Perfect. So I just want to welcome everybody to Dr. Taylor's Table Talk. This is our third episode, and today we have two very special guests. And in May, we're basically highlighting mental health awareness. And so this is an issue that not only needs to be highlighted in May, but the entire year. And so I have two great guests who are going to tell us about their journey in the mental health field and how they're impacting communities far and wide in regards to mental health. So one of the focuses today will be to destigmatize the thought around mental health and make it normalized in regards to things such as therapy. And so we'll talk a little bit about the impact that Dr. Jasmin and Dxtr Spitz have had in the Chicago community as well as other areas. So we're going to just start out with just some, if you want to just give us a little information about your background. And we'll start, of course, ladies first. We'll start with Dr. Jasmin.
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Wilnise Jasmin. When it comes to my background, I specialize in family medicine and preventive medicine. And what got me into mental health was in preparation or in my training for preventive medicine, I really looked at mental health disorders that affected people who are pregnant, especially depression and anxiety, and then see how that outlook, how that affected their children and what plans they have for themselves and their children.
Outstanding. That's very near and dear to my heart. I'm actually an OBGYN by training, so anyone who's doing work around mental health with women, I love that. There's definitely a need for that. I would love for you to come back and we can talk a little bit about, maybe we'll even delve into today about postpartum depression. I think that's huge in our community.
Yeah. Sorry, I was hoping you weren't getting background noise. My dog is over here doing stuff. She's a mix. She's pit boy. I'll give her a little guest appearance later on if you guys want. My background, so I've basically written poetry and music for as long as I can remember. I have a formal training in STEM as a material scientist. That's what I went to college for. But that whole process, through always continued writing music and spoken word, and started performing more seriously under the name Dexter Spitz in about 2015 or so. Most recently, the project How Men Cry that I started working on was just coming from a place of working through my own, process of dealing with trauma, as well as mental health issues. I have a long family history of things ranging from depression to substance uses to just all types of things like that. So just from seeing that impact and then starting to uncover things in my own personal journey is what kind of motivated me towards founding How Men Cry. So
we're going to delve more into about How Men Cry a little bit later, but that really segues into some of the work that Dr. Jasmin does in regards to the field of substance use here at the Department of Public Health.
Now that you brought up substance use, I'll just point out I'm wearing a pin that says I carry Narcan. So Narcan is the medication reverse an opioid overdose. So we always advocate for people to carry it wherever they go, even if they recognize or don't recognize anyone who has an opioid use disorder. You never know when you'll encounter someone who may overdose.
What are some signs of someone that's having an overdose? And then how can I, as like a just regular resident of Chicago or some other state, how can I obtain Narcan?
Yeah. So if someone's experiencing an overdose, you may notice that it may be harder to get their attention. They may seem over, like they're about to fall asleep. So you can call their name and try to wake them up. You may hear that their breathing sounds like a gurgling sound. They may be breathing a little bit slower. We worry about someone's breathing stopping completely. And so if you see someone who is overdosing, giving Narcan or naloxone, which is that medication, will reverse the overdose. And you can find it. We're at the health department, we're really trying to make Narcan more accessible to everyone. And so you can find it right now we're at 27 Chicago Public Library locations. And you can also come to the main health department office, and we have it here to distribute to the public. And you can also email osu.cdph@cityofchicago.org to request.
That's great. And I'm sure a lot of people don't know about that. So thanks for sharing that knowledge, Dr. Jasmin. And so let's just kind of shift gears a little bit more into like the focus around mental health and, you know, more in regards to some of the resources that you offer via Help and Cry. Jordan, so if you want to just share a little bit more about Help and Cry and the impact you're having
Sure. So
in our community.
Help and Cry is focused on changing the narrative around vulnerability and mental health for men. I don't think it would be a major surprise to say that I think a lot of men are socialized in a way to not necessarily talk about what's going on within our mental health space. I think a lot of the times we're more likely to sometimes close down, isolate, other things like that. And, you know, the hope is to really just through the action of us starting to have more conversations publicly with men, which is one of the things that we've done with our podcast, as well as some of the spoken word performance and material that I've performed, and that we're also developing like so we're also working on developing like curriculums and things that are centered, you know, more so around these conversations. And really, we just want to change that, you know, narrative by showing. That's kind of our main thing. So we actually have a retreat with some of the gentlemen who have done the podcast over the past season coming up on this Sunday. But we'll be doing more things that are kind of focused like that to get guys together, talk more openly, and hopefully knock off some of the stigma around mental health.
Oh, that's great. The curriculum that you're developing, is it going to be a virtual curriculum, or how would individuals find out?
Yeah, it'll be rolled out over time. I've probably said too much because certain things are still in development. So sorry, Audrey, if you're watching. But we're working on developing a form of digital material, as well as things that can possibly be used in schools as well for, you know, younger men that are kind of going through similar things. So,
what are the ages that you focus on in regards to Help and Cry?
yeah, the focal point now has been men that are, you know, adults, young, professional, 18 and up really is most of the focal point so far. But that's just kind of the starting point out of my network, as well as, you know, just men that we wanted to get on the podcast, because it's almost we're wanting to capture, you know, men who have been conditioned over time. You know, a lot of the narratives that we've all received. I'm in my 30s now. Several of the men in the podcast have been in their 30s, 40s. I've actually had my father on as well, you know, so you get a little bit of the context of just all of the conditioning and different things that, you know, we've kind of internalized about how we look at our own mental health. So right now it's kind of that focus, but we have some further focus on trying to work with youth and build some of that out as well.
That's excellent. I look forward to seeing how that evolves.
Yeah. And I like the point that you raised about mental health being something that's difficult for people to talk about. Here we also have this campaign called the Unspoken Campaign. And on this website, mentalhealth.chicago.org, we share stories of real Chicagoans about how receiving mental health supports really impacted their lives and changed it for the better, and also provide general information about mental health conditions. And then there's also a resource finder. So I'd like to hear.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was kind of thinking something similar of I think we should probably chat separately after as well too. So
You mentioned this resource finder. Is that currently linked on the website?
It is. So a person can put their address, and then the mental health facilities that are closest to that address will pop up. And all the organizations on the website they'll see a person regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their insurance status or their immigration status. Really decrease the barrier.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Great.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's awesome. And maybe just as a little side note on that, for a lot of the men that we, work with, a lot of them still haven't gone through their process of therapy. And I think sometimes those extra little barriers do make it just a little bit harder. So that's a really awesome setup, that's so seamless. So yeah.
In regards to time frame, I was listening to something today that talked about there is a shortage in like mental health professionals. And so when those individuals are reaching out for those resources, do you have an idea as far as like the turnaround time, as far as them being able to get an appointment? Is that a pretty quick and seamless process?
Usually the wait time isn't too long, but I could speak to CDPH. We still run 5 mental health clinics for our specific clinics. Our wait time isn't long at all, less than a week. You probably can get it within the same week if you call us.
That's outstanding, because I can think about when working in clinical medicine, many times trying to get women into psych or for mental health, we're sometimes looking at months and months on end. So that's really great that resource is out here and that people can be seen very quickly. It's definitely needed.
And you're right about there being a workforce shortage. So I think some of the funding we provide to our partner organizations, they're able to recruit additional people to provide mental health services. There are also other programs on the state level that are looking to work with colleges to train people to enter this workforce.
That's great. So mental health ambassadors are being formed. So that's really great. So in regards to, we'll maybe talk a little bit more about like telehealth and being able to reach individuals like during the pandemic that really, I think, opened up more avenues, I think, for people to have access. And just your thoughts on people being able to access mental health services through telehealth.
I personally loved it. I actually started my process of therapy in person, and then we transitioned to a more virtual space. And actually, really, to your point earlier of just kind of removing or just having less barriers, to me, it's been a better thing, because even if I've had to travel for work or something or other things like that, it still allows, for me to be able to actually sit down with someone. Now, I know that there's sometimes nothing that can really replace just that feeling of sitting down and talking with someone directly. However, it's definitely beneficial just from the standpoint of being able to remove a lot of barriers. Sorry, trying to get some of this background noise. I think I can mute for a second.
And I could jump in too. I think that telehealth services is a game changer. So it allows more people access to mental health services. But we also should keep in mind not everyone has the resources or the necessary equipment to engage in telehealth services. So I think that's something, at least on the government level, we also are aware of and trying to think of ways to actually make it more accessible.
Absolutely. So I'm actually working with the Mayor's Office on this Digital Equity Council. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at is how do we create access within communities that potentially don't have access to internet, and then also fill in the gap in regards to that whole education piece, because you can give them a laptop, but if they don't know how to utilize it, they still have that barrier. And so really trying to we're starting to do some community circles. One of our first ones will actually be in the Inglewood area at Kennedy King College on June 25th. And so really just having individuals from the community come out. Our target is to have about 50 to 100 people come out, and we'll be in small circles. We're basically talking about some of the barriers that individuals have in regards to accessing virtual services.
And even if someone has like a smartphone that they can use to receive the care, they may live in an area where they can't have privacy at home to receive the telehealth services. So those are also things we keep in mind. That's why we always advocate for both services to be provided.
Definitely. Just in regards to mental health, I know in the news we've been seeing a lot around individuals who are in the midst of like a mental health crisis. And I know there's a rollout of this new system that's coming in July. You want to talk a little bit more about this alternative to 911, so and how that can, I think that will also be a huge game changer in regards to how we respond to individuals who are in the midst of a crisis.
Yes, so you're talking about our CARE program, which stands for Crisis Assistance Response and Engagement Program. So in it, we have multidisciplinary teams that go out and respond to 911 calls where that has a behavioral health component. So a person experiencing a mental health crisis, we're really trying to approach mental health crisis as a medical problem. It's not a criminal justice problem. So right now, there are 2 pilot teams, and the members of the team include a mental health clinician, include a community paramedic, and a crisis intervention trained police officer. There'll be 2 more teams launching soon, and they'll be composed of the mental health clinician and the community paramedic. And so when they go out and respond to a person in crisis, it's not just that moment in time. They're really trying to bring them to also an alternate site. So rather than bring them to an emergency room where a person may receive care for a few hours and then discharge, they can be linked to an organization that can provide longer term care, make sure that they're stabilized, and see what other needs they have that could be addressed so they can live a stable life.
That's excellent. So how would one reach out to CARES?
Well, the way right now is to call 911. So if there's an emergency, the 911 call center, they're able to screen the calls, and those that are where someone's experiencing a mental health crisis, they'll dispatch the team. Police officers can also call for the teams to come.
And the police are also being trained in regards to how to intervene in the midst of the crises.
So yes, they've had the crisis intervention training program long before the CARE team launch. And so I know even new recruits right now, they're being trained uniformly. So they receive a basic level of education regarding how to respond to someone in crisis and de-escalate the situation, and then at least link them to an emergency room, or if there's the CARE team in their jurisdiction, call the CARE team.
That's excellent. Because we have actually seen, countless individuals who've lost their lives secondary, to us not having these things in place. And so I think it's definitely very much needed.
Yeah, and then another component of this response is we also have mental health clinicians at the 911 call center itself. And so at the 911 call center, the mental health clinician we found that they can address a large majority of these calls without having to dispatch their team as well.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And I love to hear that service, because I think unfortunately there's a lot of times that maybe law enforcement gets involved in things that they're kind of the only ones who can respond sometimes. But I definitely think that having that type of support can make big differences in a lot of communities. So that's awesome to hear something like that being rolled out and actually actively done. So that's awesome.
And that rollout will initially occur in 5 zip codes, is what I was informed of, in 5 communities.
So there are districts too. So there are 2 districts right now, one on the north side, one on the south side. We're having 2 additional districts on the west side coming out soon. But it encompasses a number of community areas.
That's great. And then in July, there will be another hotline that will launch nationally. We want to touch a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, so it's the 988 line, so an alternative to 911. So if someone needs mental health services, they can call 988, and they'll be linked to someone who can triage what kind of services or support they need, and then link them to an organization who can provide that care for them.
So we talked a little bit about stigma earlier in regards to mental health. What have been some ways that or solutions you think that we can help to destigmatize mental health in our communities, especially I think sometimes in Black communities, there's this thought that, we have to lean on our faith. And so how do we start to, I guess, have those conversations about destigmatizing mental health?
I think it honestly starts even with kind of what we're doing right now. I think it's sometimes when you're in it, maybe you're experiencing some type of mental health crisis or at least a variation of that. It's a little harder to, I would say, take yourself out of it to kind of talk in more openly spaces. But for those of us, who are paying more and more attention to those spaces, I think you just have to kind of jump out there to start them. It can be gentle. It doesn't even have to necessarily to give an example of one of the things that I've done with some of the guys, is a lot of time if you show a bit of vulnerability around a topic first, it gets a little easier, for people to maybe come back and then talk about what's going on with them. And that's worked successfully when working with youth as well as just some of the men out of our program. And then another creative thing that we've tried to do is weave it in with other type of things. So I've used boxing, for instance, because that's some of my background. So I've had guys come in and box for a little bit, let off a little bit of steam, punch a couple things, and then talk, after. And that's happened for several of our podcast episodes. So I think it's just kind of, actively but gently beginning those conversations. So that's what's been working, I guess, for us so far.
That's great. The boxing piece, I'm gonna have to check you out offline on the boxing now.
Yeah, that's I wasn't I hadn't been teaching it for a while, but it was asking myself the question, and I don't want to shame any of the guys out of there, but I was like just kind of asking myself the question of how would I have been able to get through to myself, even prior to going on more of a journey of therapy and mental health. And I was like, I would probably have to disguise it or get really creative with how it was delivered. And that's where those kind of ideas came from.
Great. I like that you brought the idea of exercise too. It really does lift your mood. If you have a lot of stressful energy, you work it out. And it also increases the feel-good hormones, endorphins. So that really does work.
I completely agree. I usually start my day off with working out. It's just the day doesn't feel right unless I've done some type of physical activity. Just getting that heart pumping. I love lifting weights. And so really I think finding those alternative self-care options I think are really huge, whether it be exercise or even things like meditation.
Yeah. And to address stigma too, I think working with faith leaders to encourage them to start that conversation with their congregation about mental health, to normalize talking about mental health, and to think of mental health as a spectrum where you have mental wellness all the way to mental illness, and we slide back and forth depending on our circumstance. And it's okay to get support so we can lean towards the mental wellness side.
I love that. I also think that we should not even make that distinguishment between mental health and physical health, and really think of it as one holistic component. Because sometimes I feel like individuals get destigmatized because of that. And so when we think about, let's say someone that's diabetic, your glucose levels are off, versus if you have a depression, you could have a chemical imbalance, or your neurotransmitters, the chemicals that are in your brain are off. And so really I think even starting to have more conversations around there's no difference between being diabetic or having depression or anxiety.
And yeah, I just want to plug wearing my primary care hat, seeking that annual checkup for your physical health. You should make it the same as seeking the annual checkup for your mental health. Sometimes there are physical health problems like having abnormal levels of your thyroid hormone level can mimic mental health symptoms. So if you have it too high, you may seem like you have anxiety. If it's too low, it may seem like you have depression. But if we correct that, you'll see your symptoms go away.
Absolutely. So huge plug for Annual visit. Absolutely. There's a question for you, Jordan. How has trauma informed conversations for how men cry?
Sorry, could you restate it? You said how much? What was the?
How has trauma informed conversations
Oof.
for how men cry?
It's pretty much the basis of it. It's hard to, and what I mean by that is on the podcast in particular is where I think you see that most. I'm not sure if a lot of the men that I've even, spoken with prior to some of the conversations would have even classified some things as trauma or like, looked at the severity of certain situations as that. And for me, going through, kind of my own process of therapy, I'm not, a licensed therapist. So I wouldn't step into that kind of realm. But the stories and things that are being told by a lot of men, and this is what I think is crucially important, is that they're heavily traumatic a lot of the times. I mean, there's circumstances of people, dying right in somebody's arms, circumstances of different like violence, abuse, domestic abuse, things like that, that a lot of, these men have been going through and have never really said, a word. So I would say it kind of is, the base a lot of the times is that you see that so much more, action or just how people are molded and shaped in the world has usually come from some forms of trauma or trying to process or try to, overcome it. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And so as far as once those individuals are identifying this trauma, so then next steps, so you would connect them, or how does it work? I know you talk about it within the circle, but then I guess what are the next steps if someone does, if they're vulnerable and they share
Well, so that's exactly why I was saying that I love the idea of the more no barrier portal, and why I was actually talking about that, because that's been something that our team has. It's hard to tackle all at once, but that's kind of like the full circle thing that we are looking to do, is be able to either partner to provide better services. I've been able to, just do kind of simple referrals or, referrals to programs or the things that I know of. But that would be kind of the full complete cycle of what we would hope to, accomplish, is to literally be able to say, hey, these are the things that are coming up. And instead of like, here are some places that you can kind of start to talk to, have more of a direct pathway of like, this person is waiting to have this, conversation, or this group or organization is kind of waiting on you. So we are working on that part. That's the the best way, the short answer.
Great. It seems like there should be like a platform of being able to just connect individuals with certain resources as far as like different psychiatrists too. I think that's definitely something that's needed. And this is something I think we could also share. We're part of the Cook County Physicians Association. And so with local psychiatrists here, I think it would be important to kind of know some of the work that you're doing here in the community in regards to trauma-informed care.
And it's very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was just saying, because I know that I'm very stern about the fact of like my own limits in terms of my, I don't have the professional background, and I don't ever want to overstep into those boundaries. So yes, I would love those types of connections or further talks around that.
But I do love that you've created the space to start the conversation, and that's so important. So definitely, it's just wonderful that you've created the space for men. Very much needed.
And before we move forward too, just want to share, as part of the mental health equity framework for the city of Chicago, one of the pillars is providing trauma-informed services for people who've experienced violence. And so, like, really, we should connect after this to get you tapped into other people who are doing similar work, so you can learn from each other and support each other.
So that really segues into the next question, and it's how important is it to address trauma in our community?
I think it's key, perhaps the number one goal we should have, because trauma influences the trajectory of our lives. and it's important to address it when it occurs. But also, if someone hasn't received the support they need at the time the trauma occurred, even afterwards, to link them to services to help them cope, because it influences how someone views the world, impacts on how someone would raise their children if they have children, impact how they interact with the world. So I think addressing trauma would really go a long way to improving the longevity. We know that there's a gap in life expectancy between Blacks and whites. Here in Chicago, I think when we think about the root causes of what causes trauma, addressing them, I think would help close that gap.
So what do you think are some of those root causes of trauma?
Well, could be, there's no denying we live in a segregated city, right? So there are areas that have traditionally been experienced disinvestment. So I think really trying to make every community have all the resources that are necessary for someone to live a thriving life. And so focusing on those areas that have historically been disinvested and pouring resources in those areas, I think would go a long way for at least beginning to address that root cause.
Absolutely. So I think when we think about these inequities that are in existence, we can't look at it as, let's say, a Black issue or a Latinx issue. We have to look at it as this is all of our issue. And really, like you mentioned, like leveling that playing ground. So making that movement from not just equality and equity, but like this thought of justice, I think is so key.
Yeah, I agree. Because I know it's not just about this current generation, but also future generations. Just to make sure that, at least for future generations too, that they don't have to wonder why their life looks so different from their friends who may live 3 or 4 neighborhoods away.
Yeah, I totally agree, and also agree with for sure the main point of it being the biggest focal point that I think we had. I think so many things that are trauma responses, like it actually reminded me of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, because they made several references of how things can kind of manifest either in our bodies or in our actions. And it's not the only book. There's plenty of books that have made this kind of connection. But how a lot of, things that are traumatic really do manifest in our day to day, even when you think they're, 30 years left behind, 20 years left behind, those things really do impact us. So I do agree. It's like one of the first talking points that I think if you can resolve so many other things within families, within communities, and then subsequently the world from there would, probably improve. So, yeah.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that. There's this phenomenon of the cortisol effect. So that's our stress hormone. And there's some thought that, having elevated levels of this stress hormone can lead to us having a higher propensity to have chronic conditions like high blood pressure and things of that nature. So really, I think getting down to the root cause of many of these issues that we're faced with in our community and have led to our untreated trauma, I think that's definitely a way to help us to attain the thought of optimal health as well in our communities.
And piggybacking off of that idea, even the other idea of epigenetics, so how trauma influences how your genes are expressed. It doesn't change your DNA, but it does impact whether or not your heart is functioning properly. Do you have enough of are your cells repairing the way they should? And then it could lead to these chronic conditions that you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think then it also has an impact also just on our overall, our mental outlook and the way that we, when you're faced with particular traumas and how we respond to them. I think that's really key as well. So there's a question for you, Dr. Jasmin. Trauma-Informed Transformation Awareness Day coming up on May 25th. Is that on Wednesday, May 25th. Can you speak to CDPH's Trauma-Informed Transformation Project?
I have to get back to that.
All right. So more information on that. So, Jordan, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the spoken word that you utilize and how that has helped to impact, or the way that you deliver that information, how that's impacted individuals that you come into contact with.
You're on mute. He's going to join us again.
Okay, all right, perfect.
But I could speak to trauma-informed, being trauma-informed. So yes, experiencing trauma impacts how you see the world. But also the idea of being trauma-informed is when you're interacting with other people, no matter how they're treating you or responding to you, being aware that not to take it personally, they could be behaving in that way because of their past experience. And so they may be reliving that experience, and just ask to be kind to each other and patient with each other.
Absolutely, just giving grace, because we all come with this baggage.
And sorry, can you hear me okay now? All right, it's my connection's being crazy. So I'm sorry. So around the spoken word pieces, was there a question directly?
Yes, I was just asking more about how you utilize spoken word to impact, or the way that you deliver, I guess, the message around either trauma or mental health, and how you utilize spoken word.
So a lot of what I've done is actually at different points of going through therapy, and this wasn't something I can't give the credit to myself to say, oh, this was, unprocessed trauma that I wrote out in this way. I was just kind of doing, the thing that I had found throughout different points in life, which was kind of venting out through journaling and other things. So I had written pieces about a lot of the traumatic things that I've dealt with, and or the lack of processing, some of the pain that I was facing. And I try to craft things into a story form. One, because I think I'm a bit more of a natural storyteller in that way, but then secondly, because I can pull directly from my personal experience, and I try to use that to, channel in, and then hopefully allow others to see themselves within those stories. So the spoken word pieces that I have for How Men Cry are kind of all centered around different angles of either not processing trauma, having things building up walls of protection, or just all the different things, usually through the context of the male experience of dealing with traumatic circumstances.
That's great. Would you be willing to share?
Sure, I would. Tonight? I don't want to overly yell at y'all. Am I like loud or even tone? Because I can get.
You can maybe pipe just a little bit.
So I can share one of my pieces that I think kind of depicts a lot of what How Men Cry is about, and it's a piece that I have called Boiled. All right. In my opinion, my mother is the greatest cook in the entire world. She can craft any dish regardless of culture or technique, and every once in a while she would entrust me with the task of helping out in the kitchen, and to this day I love to cook. Jordy, she would say, Jordan's my government name, so we know. Jordy, she would say, watch the pot on the stove. It's just water boiling, but you need to watch it and stop it before it boils over. See, it's funny how that works. Something as simple as a few drops of water can go from being a calm bringer of life to a scorching disaster. Imagine if the top couldn't pop off the pot, it would boil until the pot exploded. See, a few drops of water used to pour down my face before I learned how to hold them back, suppress the thought, get distracted, simply stop paying attention. See, I hope you know it won't make the pain go away. When I got into my first fist fight, I got my butt kicked. I didn't even throw a punch. I don't know if it was from fear or shock. To add insult to injury, he bunny hopped with his bike and landed on mine as he rolled away. I felt so much anger that I could punch through a wall. I breathed so hard, huffing and puffing, feeling the internal steam starting to rise until the tears formed at the corner of my eyes, not because of the fight, but because it used to be my friend and it hurt. And instead of letting the tears fall, I would much rather wipe them away, suppress the thought, get distracted, simply stop paying attention. See, I hope you know it won't make the pain go away. Fast forward to my first kiss. It was at the end of school. One of the cutest girls that was actually popular too liked me, and I mean the old me, me with the fearful, anxious mind, me with the stutter that I hid. See, we stood in front of the school after classes ended and we kissed. Time stood still. Shortly after, a sea of oohs erupted. I walked home feeling like I had done the impossible, and for once I was feeling like the man. Soon to be surprised with the new gossip and rumors that she seemed to regret the decision, and just that fast, like the day before, we stood in front of the school and she dumped me. Time stood still. Shortly after, a sea of oohs erupted. I walked home feeling like I never wanted to feel that feeling again. I felt so much anger that I could punch through a wall. I breathed so hard, huffing and puffing, feeling the internal steam starting to rise until the tears formed at the corner of my eyes, not because of all of the eyes watching, but because I liked her and it hurt. And instead of letting the tears fall, I would much rather wipe them away, suppress the thought, get distracted, simply stop paying attention. See, I hope you know it won't make the pain go away. Jordy, my mother would say, watch the pot on the stove. It's just water boiling, but you need to watch it and stop it before it boils over. Jordan, watch it before it boils over. Jordan, watch it before it boils over. The pain of trying to feel like you were worth something. Watch it before it boils over. The pain of knowing that the help that you need is not coming. The pain of mommy and daddy splitting. The pain of moving with dad only to be forgotten about. The pain of never really feeling a part of love. Watch it before it boils over. The pain of having to put your family dysfunctions to the side so you can focus on your work. The pain of knowing that no one is coming to help you through engineering school, coursework, or emotional support because you didn't know how to ask. The pain of being the only black boy in your department. The pain of pretending that it didn't affect you. The pain of realizing that you never healed from the first scars before the new ones formed. The pain of realizing you have more suppressed pain than addressed pain. The pain of pretending that it didn't affect you. Watch it before it boils over. The pain that has turned into more pain. Watch it before it boils over. The pain that has turned into bottle up rage. Watch it before it boils over. The pain that pushed you to make you want to commit that crime. The pain that made you want to hit that person. The pain that made you want to strangle that person. The pain that Jordan. Watch it before it boils over. And that's one of the pieces.
Wow.
And that one is essentially, when we talk about how men cry, we're not necessarily talking about just physical tears. It's about all these different ways that basically trauma manifests and shows up within the world. So those are the pieces. That was a relatively tempered version, so I wasn't yelling at y'all. It can get more hype than that. But you know, it really is about just kind of bringing together those stories. And I think for a lot of men that I've come in contact with, if they've gone through a process of therapy, you know, maybe it's a little easier to kind of talk about things. But I've found so many that, and myself included, it's something that I'm still working on, is like this initial habit to close off and to shut down, which I think a lot of times comes from the way that we're socialized.
That's great. I mean, I felt that very deeply. And it's like, I'm thinking about how women cry now, because really, I mean, I could really relate to a lot of the things that you said in there, you know, being the only Black in many settings. And so definitely can relate to that.
And I love the metaphor using water in its different forms. It's life-giving, but again, if you hold it in, you can boil over. It has many different forms. You mentioned the tear, and then we also talk about a sea of people saying oohs and ahs. So I love all the different forms.
And
you compare.
And one of the things there, even about when you were saying it's very relatable, I think what we also hope to get to is that, you know, it really isn't just an experience that's isolated to men either. You know, and I think that's the bigger overarching conversation is the one around trauma and in general. You know, and that we all, you know, it's a range of human emotions that we're all going through. And may or may not be so easy to kind of talk about it depending on, how you were raised or socialized or what kind of help you gotten to heal from those things.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big proponent. I think everyone should have a therapist. And a little bit of self-disclosure. I lost my mom when I was 8. And so, at that time, you don't talk about the elephant in the room. And I think really in Black families, we need to start having those conversations about things like that. So I lost my dad about 3 years ago. The first thing I did as an adult was I ran and got a grief therapist. And so really, being able to sit in spaces with her really helped me not only deal with grief, but also professional and personal issues as well. And so again, I think we need to normalize therapy and we need to start talking about it more often.
Yeah, totally agree. In full agreement. And that's awesome, even like to hear that it's like, you had that moment and then like the first thought or one of your first actions is to go seek to kind of speak to him. That's like extremely powerful to me. Seems like a subtle, simple action, but I think many of us are faced with circumstances like that and wouldn't, do that. So that's congrats to you on that, and my condolences on those losses as well.
Well, thank you very much. All right, so we're gonna, start to just talk a little bit more about, things that you'd like to leave our audience with today as we start to wind things down here. Are there any particular, messages or that you'd like to share with the individuals that are tuning in? How they can find you?
Yes, so I mentioned one resource, mentalhealth.chicago.gov. I think that's a good place to start for people who just want to learn more about what mental health means. And then there is a resource finder there. I know with the pandemic, we've seen a record number of people dying from overdoses. See it nationwide, and also it's impacted Chicago as well. I think there's help out there, and even today we announced this program called MAR Now, so Medication Assisted Recovery Now. So it's a phone number that you can call if you want to enter treatment or receive medication-assisted therapy. You can call and they'll connect you to someone who could provide you with the medication that same day or the next day. And so if you call the phone number 833-234-6343, that phone number is live, and help is there to connect you.
That's great. Can you repeat that number one more time?
It's 833-234-6343. Call the Illinois Helpline.
That's great.
Yeah, and sorry. Yeah, and for us, you can find pretty much anything around How Men Cry at www.howmencry.com, as well as on the How Men Cry Instagram page. We post a lot about the different men's stories from the podcast, as well as some of the things that are up and coming with our material as well. I think it might have been a team member who threw in the howmencry.com. Nope, maybe. Okay, but point is, thank you for writing that in. But yeah, we look to continue to build it out. Like I said, we're doing one of our first retreats over this weekend coming up, but that one is just to some of the first podcast guests, but we're looking to continue to expand and, hopefully broaden this conversation through performance as well as different material, curriculum, etc. So definitely follow along on the journey, and all the support. We'll take all the support that you have because I think it's a pretty challenging conversation and still relatively new. I think especially in a lot of spaces for men. So the words of encouragement, yeah.
Well, that's great. I look forward to following your journey and seeing this become a nationwide movement, worldwide
Thank
movement.
you.
Let's say that.
Let's go for it. And yes, oh,
And
sorry.
then there's
Maybe you were going to say. Oh, and I was going to say, yeah,
okay.
so a retreat for men, there will be more publicly about that when we're expanding that to a larger base.
And then you also mentioned with the spoken word performances, there may be some potential for, I guess, in-person or virtual.
Yeah, so I haven't been doing quite as many shows as normal, but I'll definitely post them on the Dxtr Spitz page. I don't know how I didn't say this at any point earlier, but all of that material for the performances with the spoken word, those pieces will all be compiled into a book, which was actually the original kind of base of How Men Cry, was as a piece of literature. So it'll be available there. We have a couple of the spoken word pieces out on our YouTube channels. But yes, there will be more than enough opportunities with performance and other things to come see it live. Just check out our social media and it'll keep you in the loop.
Definitely look forward to that.
Love it. So it's about public sharing, and it allows audience members to realize they're not alone in how they're feeling.
Yeah. That really segues into our next question. How important do you feel it is to normalize expressing when we are not in our best places mentally, or have just experienced something that has or could impact our mental health?
Oh, is that to me or you guys?
For both. Whoever wants to.
Can you repeat the
Sure.
question?
So how important do you feel it is to normalize expressing when we are not in our best places mentally?
I think it's okay. Even here, I always encourage people I work with, it's okay to take a mental health day. There's nothing wrong with that. We live in a culture where it feels like we always have to perform, almost to the point where it feels like it's 24/7. It's okay to take a step back, time to yourself. So it could be self-care, it could be sleep, which is part of self-care. It could be just changing your focus on something else, and that fosters creativity, that fosters your sense of like rejuvenating your purpose as to why you're doing. It could be your career, or it could be some other endeavor. I think taking that time to yourself is important.
And I totally agree. I think there are more workspaces that are becoming a little more, friendly to like people either taking mental health days or having those conversations. I know in my direct experience, I think as well from some of how I'm socialized, is I've felt very guilty about that at a lot of different points in life, where literally it's just like I've had passings in families, I've had extreme situations, I actually witnessed a direct violent trauma and went to work the next day and talked to my boss. He's like, "Hey, you seem a little off." And I talked to him. And he's like, "Man, go home." And so I'm glad. So I would say I definitely encourage just the normalizing of, hey, I'm having a moment where I'm not really fully okay. And I think it's a, fine line. You don't want to sink into it too far, but I think it's definitely worth, saying something, and whether that's to friends, to coworkers, but voicing it does volumes.
No, I completely agree with that. And so Dr. Jasmin is giving you permission to take your mental health day. So if you need a doctor's statement, you got it here tonight at Dr. Table Talk. So if you're in need of a mental health break or two,
show them this video.
Take advantage
Here's
of
my
it.
note.
It's definitely needed. And I do think about, like in some other spaces, thinking about like being a resident where you work 80 hours a week, and, they had this whole phenomenon of that you didn't call in sick, you had to call, they would literally say,
Wow.
Call in dead. And so really trying to change that, change the way, that culture. And so really, one of the things that we started implementing in the residency program is that the fifth Friday was like their wellness Friday. So you could take off during, lectures, so you could go out and let's say you need an oil change, a pap smear, or just a mental health break for that half a day. And so really, I think it's so important that we start to do those things. Yeah. That gives us that balance.
I've had friends who are in programs where they said, yeah, come in even if you're sick because we'll determine if you're sick. And I'm just saying, no.
Right. You walk down the hall with like an IV in the arm, like come in and we'll give you an IV, and then you go see a patient dragging an IV home. And so we really have to change that.
I have more than enough rants about that one. I'm not even going to torture y'all with that, but I have a lot of strong opinions about that, especially towards men. Maybe one quick note on it would be this idea that our value is tied to our productivity. And that's been one of the hardest mental things, like even for me personally, to start to deconstruct and work out of. But that's one of the most difficult ones, I think, is making that separation and then being okay and not feeling guilty about caring for yourself.
Absolutely. There's another question about how can we help one another to acknowledge that taking care and addressing our mental health is okay and does not make us quote unquote crazy.
So I also encourage people to be mindful of the use of the word crazy. Very stigmatizing. And mental health, we don't think twice about taking care of our physical health. I was speaking to a group earlier today. If you had a deep wound and you needed stitches, you don't think twice to go to receive the stitches. So it should be the same way when you're working with a mental health professional. You don't necessarily need to be on medication. There are different forms of therapy. So you just talked about spoken word. So there are different forms of art therapy. There's physical therapy, exercise therapy as well. All of it is beneficial to your mental wellness. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the act of conversing about it more will over time, remove some of that stigma, which is why I think conversations like this or any examples of it, I think modeling that behavior, even I think about parents with regards to kids, like modeling the behavior of, hey, I'm actually struggling with this thing, or hey, I can't figure out this thing, and bringing them into the conversations, opposed to, or, hey, I'm really having a down day and this is how I'm trying to work through it, like making it just a more normal thing instead of this barrier wall. Sure.
I completely agree with that. And so again, we need to continue to have these conversations. Again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but this is a conversation that should definitely be ongoing. So as we wrap up, in 30 seconds or less, if you could just give a quick bullet point each about mental health, and then we're gonna say good night.
I think take time every day to address your mental health. So it could be something as simple as taking a minute to do a breathing exercise. So you can Google different breathing exercises, and it really just helps you focus on like resetting your mind. And I think that could be helpful.
And I would say it's perfectly okay to be okay. It's also okay to not be okay. And to talk to people about that. And for a lot of the guys out there, I would just encourage not being so afraid to share, and also being okay with being afraid or maybe being nervous as well. I think it's a multi-layered set of conditioning that we got to address, and we can do it by talking about it. So.
Yes.
Absolutely. So in honor of Malcolm X's birthday, seek out your mental health care by any means necessary. Have a great Thanks again, Jordan, for joining us. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Jasmin.
you for having me on. Really, really nice to chat with y'all.
We look forward to connecting again in the future.
Take care.
Great night.
We're good.